Welcome to Love and Meaning, a podcast with me, your host, Christelle Robinson Tiedemann. So this week, the topic that I want to talk about is one that is kind of hard for me to put into a title, but it's been coming at me over the past week in multiple different scenarios with different friends. This topic is coming up, and the best way for me to put it is we're going to talk about values and boundaries. So, how this has come about is that I've had multiple different friends call me to help them or talk to them about a different relational issue that's come up. And then with some clients at work, the same thing. And there was this underlying theme underneath it all. So this is what came to me, like what sparked in my mind. And it's really fresh in my heart. So we'll talk about it. When we're children, we don't have a lot of control over our environment. We don't have a lot of autonomy, and we don't really have the ability to make that many decisions for ourselves. We might be able to decide, like, I don't know, what cereal we have in the morning and which socks we wear or something like that. But overall, the major decisions are made by the adults in our lives. We don't really create the environments that we're in. So what we do is we learn to adapt. And the term maladaptive coping mechanisms or maladaptive, I love the word maladaptive because, at least to me, it doesn't signify something being good or bad in and of itself, but rather, mal means bad in French. So rather, bad adapting, meaning that in your current environment, it's not working. So when we're kids, we tend to figure out ways, and this is brilliant, we figure out ways to thrive and survive in the environments that we're in, and we learn defense mechanisms. We learn strategies in order to do that. And please know, I'm not just talking about in, strictly traumatic situations. This is all of us. This is me. This is you. This is everyone. But the different strategies and the different circumstances obviously range. So this is from, the happiest of childhoods all the ways to the most traumatic of childhoods. We all find strategies in order to thrive within our environments. This is as simple as, like, to get attention from our parents, as simple as to find praise, to get more love. I'm using air quotes in that because from a child's mind, that could be so many different things, but we all do it, right? But the thing is, we use these strategies, they work. So let me just pause here for a second. Before anything that I say could be potentially triggering to anyone, these strategies that we come up with as children, they work. That's why we keep using them. Kids are brilliant at that. And I want you to commend the inner child version of you that came up with all of those strategies to survive and adapt to the environment that you were in. You're brilliant. Knowing that and having an understanding of that helps us to not jump into the personal development world, into any sort of growth, learnings, teachings, environment, and berate ourselves. Like, that's so unhelpful. Because the reality is that most of the things that we learned are because they worked at some point in our life. But then those things change and they don't work anymore. So first, commend the inner child part of you, the little child part of you that came up with these strategies, because it worked. Now we're adults. Now you actually have control over your environment. You have autonomy. This is what children lack. And we still use the same strategies that we were using as a child in our current adult scenarios with other people that aren't our parents. And then we wonder why we don't necessarily get the results that we want. And this is why they become maladaptive. So basically, what I've come to recognize is the defense mechanisms or the strategies that we use as a child. Let me put it this way. Where we needed defense mechanisms as a child, what we need as adults are values and boundaries. Child, defense mechanisms, adult, values, boundaries. So let me give you a very common example, and this comes up a lot. Messages, like on a phone, like when you receive messages or somebody calls. A lot of times I'll hear from someone that like, I sent so-and-so a message and they didn't respond. Or I saw that they read it and they didn't respond. And the person is very upset or very stressed. I mean, oftentimes, really what it comes down to is like why they're upset is because they've actually been stressing. They have been in a very neurotic state for the past however many days that this person hasn't responded, which leads to you being very upset. There's like this thought loop that they get into, or a preoccupation that they get into, where they create all kinds of stories for why that person hasn't responded. So the thing that they're doing is thinking for other people. As kids, it's very adaptive to try to think for the adults in your life in order to preempt what their response will be, in order to try to get the best response possible. Again, lack of autonomy, don't have that much environmental control. So kids learn to try to think. As an adult, this is, and again, this is, of course, this entire podcast is my opinion. So if I can make one disclaimer for the rest of forever, here it is. This is all my opinion. You don't have to love it. If it triggers something in you that's like a good trigger where you're like, damn, that hit a nerve and I really need to contemplate this because I feel truth in it, I love those triggers. If it's like, you're full of it, that's cool too. I'm totally okay with you not, vibing with it. But if it makes sense to me, there are some people out there that this is going to land for. So what was I saying? Okay, so as kids, you try to think for the adults around you, right? Now as adults, we go around and we try to do all this thinking for other people around us. There are a lot of scenarios that you're in as an adult. You have family, you have work, you have friends, you have like you're out and about and you're interacting with a whole lot of people. Your life isn't small anymore. Your life is big now. And then you have kids. And then imagine doing that with your kids. And then imagine doing that with your kids' teachers. And then imagine doing that with your kids' friends' parents. Like it can be freaking endless. Going around and trying to think about how every single person is going to receive everything that you've said in order to present it in the ideal way to get the response that you want. So I didn't even say the thing where I said the disclaimer and then I don't even remember what the triggering thing I was about to say is, but maybe this is it. So when we go around trying to think for a whole bunch of people, I'm going to say it, it's manipulative. We don't even realize that when you try to preempt how that person is going to respond in order for you to get the most favorable response from that person, this is, by definition, manipulation. Kids are manipulative. They have to be. It makes sense. When you grow up as an adult, using this strategy is somewhat childlike. There are far better ways for us to adapt to our adult environments. And when I use the term better, I mean get you better results. So when you're running around mentally like a chicken with its head cut off inside of your mind, we get stressed, we get tired, we get anxiety, we get all kinds of physical ailments, all this kind of stuff. Like this is anxiety, right? It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. It makes people, it changes us from who we truly are. In order to not feel that, in order to not run ourselves wild in these thought loops, we have to come up with a set way that we want to show up in life and then live by it. And this is where I'm talking about values. If you have a set way that you want to show up in life, and you have a set way that you believe in is a good way for you to be as a human. So most of us want to be good, I have air quotes, good human beings. But we define that for ourselves, right? So that's your job. You define for yourself. I'm not telling you how it is to be what it means to be a good human. But what does it mean to you to be a good human? Define that for yourself and then live by it. We have to recognize that people have very different definitions of what this is. And if you go around trying to fit in to every single person's definition of what that is, you're going to feel like a ping pong ball on raging waters. Like there's no way that you're not going to be anxious, that you're not going to be stressed, that you're not going to be just emotionally unstable. So having this set of values that defines how you operate in the world allows you to just be that and let other people respond as they respond. So if we go back to that example of these red messages and, they read it and they didn't respond, all that thinking that person is doing where they're getting upset is because they're creating a whole bunch of stories about what it means that person didn't respond. And may I dare say, you don't actually know if these stories are true. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But at the end of the day, really, that's an entirely other person's experience. It doesn't have to do anything to do with you. So if they don't respond and you go into this spiral loop about how you don't mean anything to them, they don't care about you, they're a terrible friend, blah, 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 blah. You've now come to the conclusion that this person is horrendous and has done you wrong. You're now totally stressed out. Who knows how many things you've neglected over those 4 days that you've been ruminating? How did you show up with your partner? How did you show up with your kids in that time? The version of you that you were in the world while you ruminated on that, like, was that the best for you? Was that the best investment of your time? And then it turns out that person was really busy and they meant to get back to you and they totally forgot. But now I don't really trust them because, yeah, that's what they say, But I mean, this is like the third time or the fourth time that this has happened. So I really don't think that I matter at all to this person. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. You're not going to know from their end what the answer to that is. But let me ask you this. What matters to you? Oops, I got passionate and hit the computer. Let me take a sip of water. What matters to you? Do you want to communicate with people that don't necessarily respond to your messages a lot? Or do you also sometimes not respond to messages and understand that people get distracted and people don't have time and you're not riding on that response because you have an entire life happening? So whether they respond to you or not, it doesn't really matter. For example, if you were inviting them to something and they missed the date in order to respond for you to be able to invite them, so you invited somebody else, so be it. That's your value. That's your boundary. Your boundary is They need to respond to me on time. If they don't, I'll get someone else. Therefore, there's no reason to be upset. The person will contact you later. Oh, shoot, I didn't get back to you. Is it still available? No, I'm really sorry. I'm going to go with Joey instead. Oh, darn. Okay, I'll catch you next time. That's it. You're going with Joey. Instead of, okay, so you waited until the last minute and now you're at the concert by yourself because instead of deciding that you need to ask somebody else because your boundaries, you give this amount of time to respond, you'd rather be a martyr and go to the concert by yourself, not enjoy the concert, and waste that second ticket. That was a very random example. But do you get my point? Like, do you get my drift here? So often, the strategies that we're using, we don't realize where they came from. And then we don't understand why they continue to make us feel bad, and we think it's the other person involved. If we establish just a set of values for ourselves, if we establish what our boundaries are, this is how many times this thing can happen to me before I decide that this relationship doesn't really work for me. Or I don't send that person messages. They're great in person, so that's my in-person person. So when we happen to be doing group events and I see them, we have the best time ever, but I don't really invite them to stuff. Or, some people are text people, some people are phone call people. They never respond to my text, but when I call, they always call me back. I don't know what it is. These are very random examples, but the key thing here is that in one scenario, you just have a set way of operating the world that doesn't involve creating any stories about you, about that person, or that person about you, to then stress yourself out because you're not a little kid living with mom and dad and need to avoid whatever consequences may come. This is a person that you're choosing to have in your life. As an adult, we have the ability to make these choices. This might sound like an oversimplification, and I totally understand that because a lot of these skills, you don't just, I'm by no means suggesting that you just wake up one day and just drop all these maladaptive ways of operating. It doesn't work like that. But I'm putting it out there as something to become aware of. Because when we start to just question whether we are the ones playing a role in the patterns in our life, you've immediately taken your power back. You've immediately stepped into a power position. Now you can do something about it. When we waste our time thinking about what other people are thinking about us, you're looking for what that person is going to do about it. And you can't control other people. And you're no longer a child. So you don't need to try to please and figure out and do all this mental acrobatics for the people in your life, because you just get to decide what kind of people you have in your life, establish your boundaries, and those people can stay or they can go. Something else that comes up from this, and I'll definitely talk about this in another episode because it's a whole nother thing, is this usually does come down to, underneath all of it, there is self-love work to be done, self-worth work to be done. And another thing I'll talk about in another topic is my feelings about worthiness, because I have so many feelings about that. Like there's another way that I like to look at it, because we were born where Melanie Endler says a statement that I absolutely love. We were born worthy and nothing has changed. Worthiness is not, I think sometimes we're often working on our worthiness. Like, I'm going to work on feeling worthy about myself. It doesn't really work like that. You just are. You just are. It's almost like an awareness that you have to step into. It's a premise that you have to understand already exists. It existed before. It's like you just kind of forgot. So it's almost like operating from the position of, if I'm just going to take the universe's word for it, then I am worthy, period. So therefore, other people's stuff isn't about me, because I am a lovable human being. Then this is my boundary. This is how I'd like to operate in the world. And I'm going to see whoever would like to play this game with me in this life. So again, we'll get into that in another topic because I know it's not as easy, like it's easier said than done, right? But that's the other thing that comes up from this, that underneath all that mental acrobatics is often some self-love and self-worthiness parts where it's like, whatever the story is that you're creating about what that other person is doing, if that story is about they don't care about me, it most likely is because you have that story about yourself, that I'm a person that people don't care about. So again, it all comes down to the work is yours, no matter what. Because when somebody comes up to you and says, you're a green leaf, there's no part of you that says, I'm a what? How am I? You just are like, okay, cool. You don't think that that's what you are because it doesn't make any sense. It actually is kind of the same thing when it comes down to worthiness. Those things aren't triggered in us unless we actually believe that it's possible and that it's true. So if you do notice that this is something that keeps coming up in your life, there's a story there that you've created about yourself, and other people are, or the scenarios in yourself, in your life, are turning out to be great examples of this story. But if you created a different story, let's say that story is, I'm a really likable person. I'm not perfect. There are things that I need to work on, and there's things that I'm really good at. Some people like me and some people don't, and that's okay. I like to operate like this in the world. This is what makes me feel like a good person. I would like for people that seem kind of like good people too to come into my life. So I'm going to operate like this, and anyone who's not interested in that, they're welcome to not hang with me. And anyone that is, they're so welcome to hang with me. That narrative lines up for a very different way of viewing when somebody read your message, left it unread, and didn't respond. Here's like a really silly-ish everyday example of like small ways that this can come up. My husband and I have an espresso machine in our house. My husband is somehow allergic to dumping the Nespresso pods. Okay? He just doesn't dump them. So when I went to make some coffee for myself this morning, and the thing was literally over, like it was like smashed. I get passionate. I keep hitting the computer. Smashed. The pods were smashed to the top. To me, it's like, I'm shocked, like that you don't see that. Like how? What vision? I'm the one who has glasses, okay? This man has 20/20 vision. You don't see those pods smashed up at the back of there, like in a can of sardines in a can at the back? No, I guess not. So, one option. I have the option to be like, I live with the most inconsiderate human being on the planet. And there is a conspiracy where he refuses, even though he's a coffee drinker in the house. I'm the tea drinker. I drink coffee 1/6 of the amount of times that he does. But there is a conspiracy here where I must always be the one to recycle the coffee pods. That's option number one. Option number two is, for some reason, when he makes coffee in the morning, first of all, my husband is not a morning person. It takes him like a good 3 hours for his eyes to even open up all the way. The most likely scenario is that he just doesn't see it. And as long as the thing closes down, he's good to go and the coffee is coming out. So most likely he's not seeing it. Second of all, he always seems to somehow like be in a rush. I don't know if this is a man thing, but like there's this way of like, how can I fastest do whatever it is? So if that means dash it into the drawer, I'm going to dash it into the drawer rather than put, everything lined up in the way that it's supposed to be. So he's in a race. That's one. Two, his eyes aren't open all the way. That's number two. Did I say two? Yeah, number two. And there might even be a little bit of like, you know what? One more can fit. I'll do it next time. There's always a next time. I'll do it later because I'm not very good at being efficient. I'm using air quotes. It's not efficient. Anyways, this is the most likely scenario. And I tend to choose number 2 because number 1 will lead me to wanting to kill my husband. And he's actually a wonderful man. So, do I create drama in my relationship because of really stupid problems like never emptying the coffee pods? Or do I focus on the fact that this man loves and adores me, treats me like a queen, is so thoughtful in all of these other ways, totally supports me, is a complete provider and protector, if you want to talk about like the traditional ways, like nailed it, has it down, and is like so bloody kind, you know? There are so many things I can go on and 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 on about the wonderful things about him. But if I focus on the way that he never empties the coffee pods, like I'm not gonna feel that way about him. So my set of values that I have is I'm choosing to give people the benefit of the doubt. This is my values. This is not something I'm doing for other people. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I'm thoughtless sometimes. I forget things. I assume that other people do too. So part of my values is that I'm not perfect and I expect other people to also be imperfect. If there's something that I can do that makes things easier, I'm happy to do it. Because everything doesn't have to be equal, though it usually ends up being equitable. That's part of my value system. My value system is to save fighting for real fights, because some things need to be fought about. This is not one of them. And we're good. So guess what, guys? I took out the coffee pods and I put them into the recycling. And I tossed it in the recycling bin. End of story. And when I dropped it into the recycling bin, I remembered something. And what I remembered is that every single Wednesday and Sunday, when our garbage needs to go outside, I never have to do it. My husband always collects and takes out the garbage in the recycling. So maybe this is my one contribution to that. And that just made me smile. But that was my choice. I didn't do this for him. That's my choice and my value system, right? So this is a very small example, but it's just an example of how we have so much power over the way that we feel in our lives, the way that we feel about other people, the way that we view scenarios. The first thing that our monkey mind goes to is often not necessarily the truth. So I guess this is a calling to ask yourself, like, where are you still using strategies or defense mechanisms that you needed to as a child that actually don't really translate to your current adult life? Where are there areas or where are there patterns that keep coming up? That would probably be the best place to look first. Is for me, I looked at patterns that kept coming up in my life. And then I realized that if it's a pattern, then it's me. So where is this coming up in your life? And then what values and boundaries do you hold about how you operate in the world? And a very different emotion might come up the next time. And maybe there's some deeper work here, and this is a calling for that. But anyways, we're going to end there. This was really on my heart this week because it just came up in so many different scenarios. And there's a way to love ourselves through this when we really recognize that the child version of us did some adaptive work, and we might need to kind of change those things now as an adult. I would love to hear any of your comments, any of your thoughts. Let me know if any of this resonated with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.